We now present For the Record.
Just ahead, with the Dane County Jail project still in the balance, how inmates housed far out of the county are faring. Plus, new restrictions may come for abortion training in Wisconsin.
They want to control not just what health care we can receive, but what information we can share.
But first, are your bank deposits secure? One of Wisconsin's top banking officials weighs in after a week of banking turmoil nationwide.
As long as your deposits are under $250,000, even regardless of what happens to your bank, you're covered and protected.
Welcome to For the Record, I'm Naomi Coles. It all started a bit over a week ago. A run on Silicon Valley Bank led to the feds having to step in and take over, and then another bank last Sunday. The banking world and those who keep their money in banks, so most of us, have been a bit on edge this week. But the Wisconsin Bankers Association says there isn't a lot to worry about here. I'm joined by Executive Vice President Daryl Lund. Daryl, good morning.
Good morning, Naomi.
What is the top line message? We're taping on Friday morning, just for viewers' perspective. What is the top line message today for not just banks in our state, but for people like me who have money in banks?
Sure. So the message that we'd like to do, and the Wisconsin Bankers Association represents pretty much all the banks in the state of Wisconsin, is that Wisconsin banks are strong, safe, and resilient. And what the Wisconsin public needs to realize, if the deposit insurance fund that protects depositors and that threshold is up to $250,000 per account, and you can do multiple accounts at a bank, as long as your deposits are under $250,000, even regardless of what happens to your bank, you're covered and protected.
What's been going through your mind as you watched this week unfold, last weekend unfold? What have you been hearing from banking members? Walk me through a little bit of that process.
Sure. So obviously when banks fail, and especially banks of this size, and for your viewers, that was in California, New York, not in Wisconsin. Their business model was much different than Wisconsin banks. What we like to say is, in Wisconsin, the vast majority of our deposits are invested locally. So if you start looking at manufacturing, the tourism industry, agriculture, mortgages, we're very much diversified. And so from this strength of Wisconsin banks is really dependent upon the strength of Wisconsin's economy, and Wisconsin's economy is doing well. And so while there were different business models of those two banks that failed, what we look at is, if Wisconsin is safe and strong and the economy is doing well, the local banks are strong and doing well.
Daryl, if you could just back up a little bit here, and just these are some very banking basics, right? But to your point, you just said if the Wisconsin economy is doing well, Wisconsin banks are doing well. Why is that? What is it that Wisconsin banks are doing with, say, let's say that I put $5,000 in a savings account in a Wisconsin bank. Where does that money go? What do you mean when you say when banking when banking is doing well or the economy is doing well, then everything's doing well? Just walk me through kind of a little bit of banking basics there.
Yeah. So the role of a bank really is to take deposits in from their local communities that they serve. So those are, individuals, those are families, those are small businesses, farmers. They deposit their money in a bank, and then banks make decisions on where those deposits are deployed into loans. So they might make loans to some of the small businesses on Main Street, home mortgages in that community, the farmers, manufacturing industry. And so those monies are loaned out based upon the credit risks of that borrower. And what's really nice about Wisconsin and doing business in Wisconsin, people are responsible and they pay back their loans. We have very small losses on loans that we put into the community. And really that vibrancy of those deposits being invested in the local community really makes what strong communities all across Wisconsin. So that's the bread and butter, I guess, if you want to call it, of local community banks and banks in general, is taking those deposits locally and finding the best place to make strong Wisconsin communities. And again, like I said, as long as the Wisconsin communities are doing well and those industry sectors that they invest in are doing well, then the strength of that bank is in place. The other thing I'd like to say from a consumer standpoint, and this is a little bit of the basics on the deposit insurance fund, which is something that protects all depositors when you put your money in there. So the first line is the loans that they make, but then say if the bank did have problems, and thankfully in Wisconsin we don't have banks failing very infrequently, a consumer's deposits are protected up to $250,000 in coverage. And what we remind our customers and the consumers are the FDIC was formed 88 years ago. And in that time period, not one penny of insured deposits has ever been lost due to a bank failure. So as long as your money is in accounts under those thresholds, you're going to be covered. And that's the good thing about Wisconsin banks. They're strong, safe, and doing the right thing for their local communities.
I got to ask you this, Daryl, and this has been super helpful, but I think when people see these types of headlines, granted, yes, these banks are in California, they're in New York, they're they're serving different types of customers than the average, but I still think that there's a lot of people who think back to 2008, right, who are fearing for the future, right? So if this could happen, if we're seeing kind of these initial headlines of bankings in different sectors happening in California and New York, I think there might still be fears about when does this potentially trickle down to smaller banks or regional banks or just your average bank? We saw yesterday, Thursday, we saw the news of, a number of the very largest banks, people like Chase coming in and, saving, so to speak, First Republic Bank. So we're still seeing some news of banks needing others to come in and secure them. So again, thinking towards the future, are we fearing any trickle-down effects? What should people be knowing about that?
Sure. So I think let's look back to the 08-09 period, which we all remember. And that was the time when the mortgage industry and housing market was really going through some very turmoil times with foreclosures, with people losing their homes. And so it had broad implications across the housing sector across this country, not just isolated in one geographic area. This is different, where there is not really a specific industry sector that is causing the problems. In the case of let's just say the bank in California, they had a high concentration of their deposits were uninsured, and they were doing business with the tech industry and cybersecurity, or the cryptocurrency. And when those depositors started to sense that there was concerns with that bank, that's when it happened. They came and withdrew a lot of money in a very short amount of time, and that caused a liquidity crisis with that bank. So that was very isolated. Most of our banks have, the majority of their deposits are under the insurance levels. And, while we do some work with the tech center, we're not as much with some of the venture capital like they are in Silicon Valley. But we don't see that as a widespread, comparing what happened in 08 and 09 to what right now, because we don't have one industry sector like the housing sector, kind of a crisis mode. And that's a little bit of the difference today.
That makes a lot of sense. Daryl, I really appreciate you coming on the show and bringing your expertise.
Okay, thanks for your time.
All right, Daryl. Thank you. We will be right back.